Hello, and welcome to Module 7. It is hard to believe that we are finally here in Module 7. It doesn't seem that long ago that we were meeting together during our weekend on campus. It is hard to believe how much material we have covered at this point, and that we have gotten through a paper and 5 quizzes, and I know that you are now working on your last paper. I know this last Module 7 contains a lot of information. I know that you will be reading about schizophrenia and a lot of the psychotic disorders. I know during this part I will put up a PowerPoint presentation that has to do with gender identity disorders. You will also be reading about substance abuse disorders, and on the PowerPoint I've also included impulse disorders. So there's a lot of information during this last module, one of the last modules. So please look through all of the PowerPoint presentations. Make sure to read the Gabbard chapters. I know that we don't do a lot of the lectures, especially on these videos, so I know a lot of it is up to you to read that material. So I certainly hope that you're reading the material. If there's anything that ever comes up for you in any of that material, I hope that you will feel free to email me and ask me questions about any of that material. I've included some extra reading materials also in the shared document section, and also I am going to try to see if I can find a video on schizophrenia or any of the psychotic disorders to also upload. So if I do, I will certainly send an email to let you know that there's a video I would like you to watch. This week's discussion question has to do with pornography, and one of the reasons I've decided to choose pornography as looking at pornography, more so internet pornography, as a possible future mental disorder, or looking at it as a category in the DSM-4. It's mostly because if you've probably been watching the news, there's so much information out there now about a lot of 12 to 17-year-olds or middle school children or high school children who find themselves in all kinds of trouble now when they're sexting or sending information through emails, telephones, or finding themselves on the web looking at hardcore pornography. And I just think it's a topic that I think most of you will find yourselves, if you're not finding clients right now who are talking about that, you certainly will in the future. So I thought it'd be an interesting topic to put up for discussion and see what you have to say. I know one of the links that's one of the links sends you to a place where there's about 18 different articles, and some of the articles one of the articles in particular interviews inmates, and I thought it was a very interesting article. I think it talks about sex crimes, and I thought that would be sex crimes and prisoners. And if you have an opportunity to go to that website and read some of those articles, I think you'll find it really fascinating. So I hope you'll enjoy this week's discussion question. And I do want to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed reading your discussion questions. I find that it's one of my highlights of the week. There's so much I want to say about so many of your remarks, especially one of the things that really stands out for me is the discussion week about Assad, and how much you had to say about whether you thought Assad had a personality disorder, and how much you took into account him being from a different country, and whether it's ethical almost to give somebody a personality disorder from a different culture, and how sensitive and aware you were about Assad. And yet I kept thinking about Assad, and I kept thinking about how many children and how many adolescents and how many young adults, I think he was 22, from the United States and from minority communities in the United States find themselves in similar situations like him, and in our juvenile court systems, and yet they do get personality disorders. And I just wonder to look at our own minority cultures here, and to sort of get a sense of what it would be like to view our own cultures through the same lens that we saw Assad, and to think that maybe in many ways some of our youth and minority cultures here do find themselves in just terrible poverty situations, and maybe we should take into account a lot of that when before diagnosing people with personality disorders. So I thought you did such a brilliant job on that, and last week's discussion on obesity I also thought was incredible, and thank you so much for sharing so many of your personal stories, particularly during that discussion week. So thank you so much for everything that you do for this class. I thoroughly enjoy meeting each one of you individually in your discussion points. So thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed this discussion week, and I look forward to reading your stuff. I look forward to reading your paper. I do want to say a couple things about your paper. I know a lot of you have had questions about it. What I'm looking for Standard 1 in particular is I'm hoping that you'll be able to get the information that you wrote for Maria during Standard 1. Most of the anxieties that you wrote about, the problems and stressors that Maria developed in your papers during Standard 1, and that you'll be able to use a lot of those stressors, and that you apply a theoretical model to explain some of Maria's upbringing, the approach you're using to sort of theorize or conceptualize Maria's case. During Standard 2, which is the one that I'm most interested in, is when you actually look at some of the anxieties and some of the problems and situations that Maria finds herself in, and some of the defense mechanisms that she's using. How do you imagine Maria will present in therapy? If she presented to your office, or she presented to you, what are some of the signs and symptoms that might be visible? Using these signs and symptoms, how might you diagnose her? And if she presents to you with anxiety, what diagnosis would you give her, and what other diagnoses would you rule out? Very similar to what we've been using in the quizzes. So Standard 2 would look very much like you've done with all the quizzes that you've had in this class. So giving her a diagnosis based on the symptoms that you see, based on the anxieties that you've actually given her during your paper 1. And then Standard 3 is sort of a treatment plan. So based on the diagnosis that you've given her, then what sort of theorize what treatment plan would you give her? And then of course Standard 4 is just a general APA guideline, using, making sure you apply all the APA guidelines to your paper. So that's it. I look forward to reading your final paper, and once again, thank you very much for your time.